This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Friday, June 1st, 2018. My guest is Julian Chokkattu. Did I say that right, Julian?
Yes, you said that right.
Damn, I got it. Yeah, I'm happy. When you have a name in your head and you don't say it right in your head for a while, this is a bad sign.
Right, yeah.
So listen, let's talk about phones. You and I are phone people. You're this kind of mobile editor for Digital Trends. I used to be senior mobile editor at Engadget, and my show is all about phones. So, I have guests sometimes that are not necessarily phone centric, and I think that makes the show more interesting. But we have a lot to talk about. I think there's enough phone announcements in the last couple of weeks, or phone news, like things like Essential, not making another phone, all that stuff that I want to cover on this show. And I know you'll have opinions. Let's start with the most obvious thing that's on my plate, which is the HTC U12 Plus. You have a review unit, I presume, by now. I have one. I just got it out of the box. I haven't had a chance to set it up yet. I did do a hands-on, though, and I did a video. What is your take?
I've been using it for about 4 days, I think, now. My take. Okay, so it's a bit of a... It's very, very mixed. There's a lot of things I like about it. I actually like the back design, the translucent design. I'm okay with the bezels on the front, although, it does look a little dated compared to the competition, but it's not a big deal to me. I don't really care if there was a notch or if there wasn't a notch. What really sort of gets me or annoys me is the digital buttons on the side of the phone. And when they first sort of announced it, and then when I first tried it out at the meeting I had with them, it was sort of like I was, open to it. I was, okay, I haven't seen that in a phone, other than, say, like an iPhone 8 or something like that. So I thought I would be interested to see how it worked, and I thought it might have a chance at, actually presenting something really cool and new that worked really well. But over the past, say, 4 days, I've gotten quite annoyed at the use of digital buttons, and I really do miss physical buttons now, because there's a lot of accidental presses. I've accidentally pressed when I'm just holding the phone, I end up apparently putting enough pressure on the volume down button to suddenly trigger Do Not Disturb mode. I've accidentally put enough pressure on the power button so that the screen just suddenly goes dark. And you know how there are those edge sensors on the side of the phones where you can squeeze the phone? When I'm just holding the phone, I just start seeing these blue dots when I'm, like, say, reading an article or something like that on my screen, because it thinks I'm trying to or about to squeeze. So it's like all this visual things and disturbances that are happening when I'm using the phone that I feel like isn't really necessary for me, and these are all additional features that are supposed to make my experience better, but I feel like they're just more distracting and starting to get a little annoying at this point. I still do like EdgeSense, and I do like those gestures, and I think they're a neat idea, but I feel like I really might have to go back and revisit the settings for how much I have the sensitivity set to, because I feel like because mine's in like the medium sensitivity, I think, but it feels still very sensitive, and I feel like I have to make it max to really be able to use the phone, or just turn it off at a certain point, because that's, I think, the biggest sort of letdown is that I also don't know why they have the buttons sticking out so much if they're digital. Like, why not just make it smooth? It's
kind of a transition kind of phase, I guess. Look,
yeah, that's what they told me too. So
I feel the same. I feel the same, though. I do. First of all, I'll be honest. I never liked the squeeze feature on the U11 or U11 Lite. I haven't tried the U11 Plus, but I'm sure it's the same. I don't like it on my Pixel 2 XL. I finally turned it off because it's just driving me crazy. Like, I would pick up the phone and trigger Google Assistant all the time when I didn't want to. And that's, honestly, now that I've lived with a G7 and a physical Google Assistant button, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind this is the way to do it. You need a Google Assistant button that's dedicated. or a button combo like Siri double click, whatever, right? So the Sense stuff doesn't do anything for me, but
no,
I'll be honest that I think the power and volume rocker thing, I have mixed feelings about. I feel that it could be done right, but it's not right now. My biggest gripe right now is that if the phone is turned off, and I turn my phones off at night. I review a lot of phones. I don't need them on at night. I usually charge them off, and I can't tell when I've turned on that phone. Like the initial turn on, you would think it would confirm with some sort of haptic talk or something.
I believe there should be a haptic,
but it doesn't. It doesn't seem to. Like it's not clear to me that I've turned on the phone is what I'm saying. There might be, but I don't really know. And that bugs me. Now, while in use, as I said, I just got it out of the box. I haven't really had much of a chance to try it out. So I'll judge for myself, but I can understand your frustration. I don't see what the necessity is of doing this.
So I asked them why they went with the digital buttons, and they said it helps with better waterproofing, but at the same time, it has the same level of waterproofing as the Galaxy S9. So how much better is it really? Is it like really improving anything? Like I don't care that much about water resistance in terms of if it's IP68, that's good enough for me at this point in time, and I don't know if them using digital buttons really changes anything. So
look, they gave us the same line last year with when they removed the headphone jack.
Right.
And I mean, maybe it wasn't them because I don't think was the U11 water resistant? Yeah, it was. Yeah. I think it was them. And I'm like, guys, Galaxy S8 at the time, or S7, whichever it was, is water resistant with a headphone jack. That's BS. So look, I'm not very convinced about that. And physical clickable buttons just have this great feel to them, and the only company so far that has pulled off replacing a button with haptic feedback that works every time and feels right every time is Apple. Not on the phones, in my opinion, on the MacBooks with the trackpad.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, I do think that even with Apple on the phone, it makes sense to make that home button touch sensitive, because that isn't necessarily the same functions. Because like the power button and volume buttons are so important to make sure they're always right, and they're not like doing these, like you always press the home button for a reason, right? So I feel like that's a little different, and the fact that they didn't use that kind of technology on those other buttons just says something about maybe they think it's not there yet where they can do that as well. So I just think HTC sort of might have pulled the gun a little too early on this, or just didn't implement it in the right way yet. I mean, I'm going to keep using the phone and see what I think. But at the moment, after 4 or 5 days of use, I am a little annoyed, and it's just an extra disturbance that now I suddenly have to deal with for no real benefit.
I hear you. Look, I want people to are listening to the podcast to understand that this is not going to be a showstopper for me, okay? No matter what, I think I'll get used to it. And I think there's a lot of room to improve this in software to make it good. The haptic engine, what are your thoughts on the haptic engine on that phone?
I think it feels really good, actually.
My favorite are the LGs, right?
Right.
By far, my favorite haptic engines are the V30 and the G7 right now, other than the iPhone 10. I don't know about the 8. I haven't really tried it long enough. What did you say you thought about it?
I mean, yeah, I think it's, I do like I think, so they did nail the feedback that you get when you do press.
That's what I'm talking about, the haptics.
Like,
yeah.
I do really like the haptic that you get when you touch the power button and the volume rocker button. Okay. I just think the sensitivity is the issue.
Right.
And,
got it.
But yeah, the haptics are good overall. The phone's speed is good. There's a lot of good things about this phone, and I feel like that's just because phones these days just are very good, and it's those finer details that you're really nitpicking, and one of them is the digital buttons. But also, I don't really like Sense UI. I think it looks a little dated in some places. But the camera is another point that I think is...
Well, before we get into that, let's finish what I was going to say, which is my point is that if the haptic engine is good, and I'm asking you because I literally got it out of the box, I've used it like, I haven't even set it up yet. So I haven't really used it to be able to tell. And my point of reference right now is the iPhone 10, the V30, the G7, which I think have the best haptics of any phone. I think the Pixel 2 XL has pretty decent haptics as well, but a little underused. So I think you're right. It's a sensitivity issue, and it can be fixed in software. So there's still hope. I'm not going to knock the phone on that. And in terms of my little brief hands-on time with it, I liked a lot about that phone. I don't really feel the bezels are a big deal. I mean, yeah, it's a bit last year with the top and bottom 18.9 kind of vibe. When you compare it to like a G7 again, or like a OnePlus 6, or any modern phone that has I hate to say it, that has a notch, the screen real estate on the U12 Plus is a little on the low side compared to them, right? Like, to me, the G7 being narrow and having 19.5 by 9 aspect ratio, I really feel like that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it definitely is easier to use the G9, I think, in terms of holding your phone, how it feels in the hand. This one is very wide now, it feels like, compared to a lot of the other
exactly,
devices.
right? Yet it's not wider than my Pixel 2 XL, so I don't really get it.
I think there is a bit of heft to the back. Like, if you look at the thickness, I can't remember the exact number, but it definitely does feel heavier and thicker and more of like a chunkier phone, I think, than the G7, especially because I came from the G7 straight to this one, and the G7 is so light.
I know.
It feels cheap sometimes because it's so light. But
I have to give HTC credit for making the U12 Plus feel premium and heavy and chunky and like solid, like you can drop it, nothing bad's going to happen. And the build quality is typical HTC. And the materials are great. I've got the translucent blue one. It sounds like that's what you have as well.
Yes.
I do have to admit that red one is pretty hot, like turning into gold. Like, wow.
I kind of already am over. Like, I like the translucent one, but I actually now would sort of prefer the red because I feel like it's just so different.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the display, you touched on 18.9, it's fine. Like, look, there's a bit more bezel than the competition. I think it's still fine. The display looks really good. It's an IPS panel, which is really surprising to me, actually.
Yeah, it's surprising. Everyone's going to OLED, but I mean, I don't think I can really criticize the display because they didn't use OLED, because I don't feel like I've had any issues using it. It's good. It has good colors. I think it's sharp enough, and I do think the only gripe I have is that it doesn't feel like it's that bright in when I've been using it outdoors. Like, I feel like it could have been brighter.
Well, you came from a G7, which is the brightest IPS panel on the planet.
To be honest, I think that G7 feature where I can max out that boost, the brightness, that's surprisingly a feature I now miss on a lot of phones, because like when they announced it, I didn't think it was that big of a deal or that crazy, but now, having used it and going to other phones when I'm, out and about, and I'm like, oh, it's the brightness, max brightness isn't enough. I do miss the G7, and I frequently think about that.
Yeah, no, I think that, look, overall, I mean, you've got more hands-on time, so I'd like your thoughts on this, but I had, other than the haptic stuff, the lack of physical buttons, which was it's still a bit off-putting. I overall had no issues in my hands-on with anything. I'm annoyed at the lack of headphone jack. I really thought that with all the feedback HTC got last year, that they would smarten up, because as an underdog, they should listen to what people want. But I think they're kind of like stuck with their Usonic, messaging. And honestly, I'm not a fan. I mean, I'm a fan of very high-end audiophile grade headphones and earbuds and in-ear monitors. So that's probably where I'm coming from, which is why, again, LG wins every time here. But in the past, HTC used to be such a it used to be at the top in terms of audio output, and now I feel that having to use a dongle, unless I use a really good dongle, just sacrifices a whole layer of what to me made an HTC phone so good. And it pissed me off last year with the U11, and I just really thought they would reverse that somehow. I have a feeling that nobody that's switching over will ever reverse back, which I think it sucks. I think companies should be smart and listen to what people want,
Yeah, I mean, the audio thing now is something I don't really think of when I think of HTC. It's like boom sound. Like, I don't even think of boom sound. Actually, I still have to test boom sound to see how it stacks up. But G7 is now the one company that I'm thinking of when I go to, like, who has a lot of good features and support for high res sound and headphones and all that stuff. And I think to LG rather than
it's interesting because
HTC.
I think OnePlus made a fuss about the OnePlus 6 having a high quality audio amp and stuff for the headphones, but honestly, it doesn't deliver. Like, it's fine. Don't get me wrong. It's totally fine. I'm talking about like being a bit of an audiophile here, okay? So the average person will find the performance of the OnePlus 6 headphone amp and DAC perfectly adequate, but I feel that it's just no different than a Galaxy or iPhone to me, which is fine. Again, these are really decent quality sounding phones. It doesn't sound bad. But, the LG phones, at least the ones with the quad DAC, have really stepped things up a notch. And I thought that maybe there was going to be a bit more to that with the OnePlus 6. And I haven't obviously listened to U12 with its dongle. I don't even know if there's a dongle in the box. Now that I think of it, I didn't look.
I think there is. I don't remember actually.
Oops! I guess I left the box at my other place.
That's the other thing. Like, I haven't. I tried the U-Sonic Buds last year. I think with the U11, and I don't think they've said they've improved it in any way or form. So I haven't truly bothered to check it out yet, but I will, and I just wasn't impressed last year. So
neither was I, but I think some people are going to love it because it's got built-in noise reduction and you can adjust to your hearing profile, which I think is a very valid thing. It's just, to me, it's such a subtle difference that I really didn't think it was really worth my while. And the noise reduction feature, honestly, my in-ear monitors that I stuck in my ear canals that are like earplugs with built-in drivers attenuate audio way better than any active noise reduction ever would without coloring the sound whatsoever. So that's the camp I'm on. Speaking of the latest devices that I've been listening to music with are the Etymotic Research ER4SR, which are the studio reference version of the ER4s. The ER4 is in-ear monitors from Etymotic that have been around for quite a while. Like, they kind of started the trend, like before Shure and Ultimate Sound and all these other companies started making things you stick deep in your ear canal that attenuate the outside audio and play music for you, called in-ear monitors. There was Etymotic Research, and the ER4s were kind of like the studio reference for a long time, and they just came out with basically 25 years after the initial, or even 30 years after the initial device, they came out with a new version, updated for the modern age. A little more sensitive for portable use, all that stuff. And it's called the ER4SR Studio Reference. And man, these are freaking awesome. Watch my YouTube channel for an unboxing video and some listening thoughts. But, that's kind of how I evaluate things. Either that or my Beyerdynamic DT990 Pro open headphones that I'm wearing right now for the podcast. And you see me wear a lot on my videos when I'm on Twit and stuff. To me, if the phone can't drive those or pass the test of handling those headphones, I'm not interested. It's basically what it comes down to. And the iPhones do fine. The Galaxies generally do fine. Of course, the LGs have no issues. But there are other phones that do have issues. Like, most of the mid-range to cheap phones can't handle driving these properly because there's just not enough juice coming out of the headphone jack. So, I know I'm sending mixed messages here because on one hand, I'm saying you need a headphone jack, but then I'm saying you need a headphone jack that's worthy. But I guess that's my point. You need a headphone jack that's worthy. And I want to give props to Moto because I've got a G6 review unit. And like the Z2 Play last year, in fact, like the entire Z series that have headphone jacks, which is all the Z Play series, the audio coming out of Moto's G6 is super tight, high quality, much better than what's coming out of the OnePlus 6 or Galaxy or iPhone. Not as good as the LGs, but I'm really impressed that Motorola, and a phone that costs $250, has that high quality audio out of the headphone jack. It's not loud enough to drive my headphones for like outdoor use or anything, but that's neither here nor there because the Bears that I'm wearing are not meant to be worn outside. But it's fine for my Etymotic, so that's good news. Sorry, we just totally tangented. This is the word that I use, tangenting. That's what the podcast is about, Julian. So yeah, audio. I kind of wish I had put a headphone jack on that phone. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's still like, I think there was an outline piece that's been shared a lot recently about Apple and the use of dongles. I think it was yesterday or today that I saw it going around. And I mean, it's clear that a lot of people still miss the ease of just plugging in a headphone jack. And I'm sort of in the camp that I don't mind the lack of a headphone jack anymore. Initially I did, but now I have just some normal. Currently I'm using the OnePlus Bullets wireless earbuds.
Yeah.
I think they're fine.
What do you think of them? Yeah,
they're fine. I think for $70 they're pretty good. They strangely don't support aptX HD. They support just aptX. But I think, for the price, for how they feel and how they work and some of the features that they have, I think they're a pretty good deal.
I think for the price, they're really good. They don't meet my sound quality requirements. My primary concern with them is that they don't have enough detail in the high and mid end. So they have good bass, I think, for not overly overpowering bass, which is a common problem today. I think there's an entire generation of people growing up that have no idea what real bass sounds like. All they listen to all day is exaggerated bass, and they don't know. And it's crazy to me. But hey, so they sound decent to me, except they kind of lose. They fall off a bit at the high end. They don't have enough of a clear and detailed high end to me. But for $69, like, come on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Also,
and
the other thing is they're wireless, and they're good wireless. Like. Yeah. You have aptX, not HD, as you mentioned, but the connection is strong. Like, yes. One of the biggest problem with these, wireless around the neck headphones typically is that I find I lose signal. Like, even if with the phone in my pocket half the time. I don't know if that's a problem with you as well.
I haven't used enough, I think, to. I do remember when I used the Pixel Buds; those were definitely not good at maintaining a signal.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like that's kind of their job, right? You're going to be wireless, like. Fix that. I don't know. Speaking of, I'm hoping that the Pixel 2, Pixel whatever they are. 3. No, not the phone. The buds. The Pixel Buds
the Pixel
2
Buds. Yep.
will remedy some of these issues.
I think that's one of the most exciting things I think I'm looking forward to later this year is that because there's a lot I liked about the Pixel Buds, like how you access an assistant and how you interact with those notifications and things like that. But yeah. I think they really will take the feedback that they heard over the past year, and I mean, at least I hope. But I sort of have faith, and I do hope that they deliver with something that's much better.
Have faith, my friend. So talk about the camera, because you were starting to, and I think that's a really important thing we should talk about.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been taking a bunch of photos. Daylight photos, I think, are very strong, and I think that is this phone's, the best part of this phone is that it takes amazing daylight photos. Low light, it has a ton of grain, but it does manage to take really good low light photos, but I don't think it's up to par as, say, a Galaxy S9 or even a Pixel or a P20. I still feel like those phones are like my go-to. Uh-huh. There's still a ton of detail, very good color accuracy. It's just in low light, there's almost zero attempt to sort of manage the grain because it is everywhere. And
so do you think it's over noise reducing, or is it just not noise reducing?
I don't think there's any noise reduction because for example, I took a selfie and I was trying to do it where I was near a street lamp. It wasn't completely dark yet, but I took a selfie and I looked at it on my computer later because it looked fine on the phone, but when I looked at it on my computer...
But that's the front camera though, right? Like I'm talking about the rear camera.
Yeah. No, that was an example, but the rear camera I see the same thing. It's like, it's very detailed, but when you start going, anything really dark at night, whereas on the Samsung, for example, they have that multi-frame reduction where they're reducing a lot of that noise or sort of just blending it so you don't really see it. It's very visible on the U12. And it is I tweeted out a photo, one low light photo, and even someone had already mentioned, hey, one part of this photo just looks really blurred, but it wasn't blurred. It was just that grain was just so present that it was sort of hiding the text.
It sounds to me like they need to tweak things still, because actually, if it was just bad or lack of noise reduction, you just see noise and it would be uniform. You wouldn't get any blurring. Right. You would just get, I think to me what it sounds like is a combination of poorly implemented noise reduction, as in it's selective in the wrong way, and probably really poor JPEG a compression, right? They probably over compress the JPEG part, which is where JPEG fails at compressing noise, right? Like, because as you can imagine, it's like feeding it wideband, right? It doesn't work.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a lossy codec. It's not going to be able to keep the whole thing, yet noise is broad, so it's going to try to keep everything, so it just mushes it away. I'm curious to compare it, and I haven't done this yet, obviously, since I just got the phone, but comparing it to the U11, because the U11, for all its failings, especially in kind of missing the boat on being a modern looking phone in its time, I loved it in every other way. Lack of headphone jack and 16:9 bezel madness notwithstanding. The camera I thought was pretty strong on the U11, especially in low light. So it's strange to me that they would miss that, and I'm wondering how much of
though, because I don't remember. So I didn't really use the U11 too much. We had another person review it, but he said almost the same thing that I feel like I was saying with the U12, is that it was really strong in most situations, but anytime you really dipped into like dark situations or nighttime photos, it just wasn't as good as its competitors, like the Galaxy S8 at the time, or the Pixel or something like that. So I haven't used it myself as much as I feel like I should.
It's also possible that when I was comparing it at the time, this was before the Pixel 2, right? First of all.
Yeah,
right?
That was true.
Let's just make things 100% clear.
Yes.
But when I compared it to the Galaxy S8 and the LG V30 at the time, which was out around the same, later, but before the Pixel 2, after the Galaxy, and compared it to the G6 itself, the previous LG phone, I just felt it held its ground. I think it took a couple of software updates, but I took it to Burning Man to take a lot of my night shots, and it did a good job. So okay. I think that I don't think it's a sensor and optics problem here. I think it's a software tuning issue, because on paper the sensor is really solid, right? OIS, large pixels. What is it? 1.5, 1.4 micron, f over 1.7, correct?
Yeah.
So that should work. How's your experience been with the defocusing, the bokeh effect on the front and back?
I gave it a try 2 days ago. I think it's fine.
It's not great.
It's like, I think the Pixel still does it best.
I know
iPhone does natural blur. Pixel does like very accurately like identifying those edges really well. Because the one I took with the U12, it did a good job with the blur, but it still had problems with hair, kind of like how the iPhone has problems with hair.
Right.
It just sort of didn't get some of those strands, and it still looks like a great photo. It's sort of obvious when you start noticing the mess ups with the hair. So I mean that's mostly the case with almost every phone except the Pixel. I found the Pixel just does such a good job of identifying those edges with portrait mode. Right.
What's been your experience with the front cameras? Is it worth it to have dual cameras?
I still, because I don't think the front camera, the second one, is not something it's a passive camera. I think it's not like anything you can actively use. So I don't know exactly what it exactly is helping with, other than portrait mode. I think it's purely portrait mode, and it's fine. Again, I don't think there's anything crazy here. I'll definitely need to do a little more testing, because all I did so far was a few low light shots, and you definitely can't do any portrait mode low light at all with either camera. So
I'm about to head to Computex, and I'm taking the phone with me. I'm going to set it up while I'm at the airport. That's usually a good way to waste my time at the airport. So I'll let you guys know next week or the week after. But me and cameras, I'll put it through its paces. It'll be in challenging environments. I'm a little torn by this device. I mean, it's there. It hits a lot of the check boxes that we are familiar with from an HTC phone, like materials, build quality. It adds some of the features we wanted last year, like dual cameras and the 18:9 display. which in a way, at least the display made its way to the U11 Plus, which we never got. But is this really anything like, I don't know, like, is it worth it? Like, is HTC, does HTC matter? Like, that's my concern. It's like, I feel like they're just doing this phone because they want to have a phone, and they're just holding their breath until their VR business takes off.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I feel like too. I don't know, because it is very expensive, I believe. I forget, I think it's 850. I can't remember.
I think it's 800, 850, depending on the configuration you get. I could be wrong.
Yeah, so I feel like it's very expensive for a phone that...
I mean, get a Galaxy S9 at that price, right?
Exactly, and even then, hell, I just get a Pixel 2, like, not the expensive one, just get the 650 one, and I feel like you might have a vastly better software experience. You might get a similar camera, maybe better on the Pixel 2. Just, it's like, software is like one of the things. It's like fine on the U12. It's just one of those things, but I just feel like the Pixel is better, obviously.
I mean, it's Sense. It's at least lightweight Sense nowadays compared to what it used to be. But honestly, to me, I don't understand why anybody today does not make a phone that just has, you know, what Moto is doing, what OnePlus is doing, what Google is doing. I guess in a way, HTC is there because they're not really skinning it that strongly. You just have that weird...
Well, I just opened my app drawer to sort of... so I have hidden 13 apps in the app drawer because there's just all this excessive...
But this is HTC's app, right? Because you have an unlocked phone like me. These are not carrier
No. These aren't carrier. These are HTC's apps, and they look terrible to me, and I feel like they are terrible. Like, I'm having actually this bug that I have to actually ask HTC about, because I can't use Exchange with Gmail on this phone. It's the first phone I've ever experienced that issue with. So I've been using HTC's email client, and it is not a good app at all. So I'm probably going to download Outlook, but it's just there are apps that they have, like, at this point, really, like, do I have to use HTC's messaging app? Why is that a thing, right?
That is crazy. Do you know that there is I think there's a thing you need to download from the App Store that adds Exchange support to Android? It might not be baked in. That used to be
the case, but I for every other phone, I never had to do it. I mean, I used to do it, like, way back when it first announced, and then I haven't had to do it at all with all these other phones, and this is the first phone. So maybe I'll give that a look if that's
check it out, because, you know, it's like Google Cloud Print. It's not on every phone.
Yeah.
Like, you'd think it'd be on every phone, but it's not. Sometimes you have to manually download it. Sometimes they have their own print provider, which is really weird, like HP or something you don't want.
Yeah.
Yeah, so look, I've got mixed feelings. I am excited HTC made another phone. I almost thought this wasn't going to happen. I don't know how you feel about that, because after them losing 2,000 engineers to Google, not losing, but trading, giving, whatever, selling,
I was like, who's left to make
right,
this
I was
phone
like, who's
happen,
left to
right?
make a phone? I mean, clearly their VR business is their core business now, so are they going to even make a phone? So then they surprise us with this, and I don't want to knock them for it. Great, we've got another choice, another HTC device with all the, as I said, it checks all the HTC boxes, but I just feel like it just, for the money, it's just too little, too late, right? Like, I mean, you know, it does have Snapdragon 845. I think it performs fast enough, right? I don't know. Is it?
Yeah, no, I haven't.
Like, there are no issues with performance from my time with it. You know, enough RAM, enough battery. All the stuff is good. The camera, you know, needs some improvement, but that's not surprising. It needs to be fixed. I'm actually surprised it got the DxO score it got, considering what you're telling me about low light. But who cares about DxO? I mean, I don't believe anything about it.
Well,
I think,
because, you know, you always have to jump into those reports from DxO, because the overall number never really truly represents. Because it could totally be great with stills in daylight, but it could have a terrible score for video. And I think the P20 was one of them. Like, it has terrible video taking capabilities, so, you know, but it's still high on the list. So it's one of those things that you have to just dive in.
Totally. And the other thing with DxO, I think that's a big issue, is that a lot of their tests are heavily on the lab test side, right? Like, and that's fine, but that's not that's not how people use phones, okay? Like, and I know they're starting to do more, real life tests and more
they are.
Subjective evaluations now, but I just still feel that DxO doesn't really represent what's going on out there. To me, you know, I think the Pixel 2 XL is still the best phone overall for taking photos, even though personally, as a kind of amateur photographer, I love all the flexibility the P20 Pro gives me, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, if I just want to mash a button and get a good result, I always know it's going to be the Pixel 2 that's going to win the race, right?
Right. Yep.
So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm still, I'm probably going to start working on my review next week, but I'm still in the confused or perplexed camp of do I recommend this phone?
I like you're confused about this phone.
Because it's there's no doubt it's a good phone, and whoever gets it will probably be satisfied.
Yeah.
But do I recommend it knowing all the other phones that are out there that are probably more capable? When I was going to say, actually, I'm currently doing that with so our G7 review went up like a couple weeks ago, and I'm about to do an update to the review now that I've gotten and used the final version for a few days, actually a week. And I think at this point, I am not going to recommend the G7.
What is it?
Why I'm not recommending it? So it's the camera, I think. Wide angle is cool. And initially, for my original review, we didn't know the price, and I thought that they might price it at $650. Which is
me
what
too. We all did. And at $650, it would have been an absolutely no questions asked phone.
That's why initially in my review, I had said if it's $650 like the G6 was, perfect. This is a great phone. Go buy it, whatever. But when they said it was $750, I was like, okay, now I have to reanalyze everything I said, because now this puts it in the camp of, well, why not just buy an S9 or why not just buy a Pixel 2 or something like that? So it's the camera that I think really, really, really does fall short, because, yeah, wide angle is cool, but it's limited to those certain types of scenes that really benefit from a wide angle camera. And then the only other thing, like, I think AI cam is garbage.
Honestly, it's total garbage. It's really useless. I don't even know why they bother.
The standard camera is fine, and I think portrait mode is surprisingly good.
Actually, you're right about that.
The portrait mode, right? Every time I take a portrait mode photo, I'm always like,
because it's the first time we've seen portrait from LG, and they nailed it, guys. They did.
But it's low light that it is atrocious. Like, I think I had compared it with someone else who was using the G7, and I was using the U12 Plus. The U12 Plus's low light photo looked far more detailed. A little grainy, yes, but far better than the G7, because it was the G7 just was completely like blotchy and blurry and grainy, and it just had all the signs that I would expect to see in like a $500 or like a $400 phone. And you know what?
This has been the downfall on the G6 and the V30S as well.
Exactly. It's the same exact problem.
And I want to point something out. If you go to manual mode, everything changes. Seriously.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's insane. Shoot in RAW on that phone, and holy fuck balls, it is good. I have shot a whole bunch of low light on at least the V30, which I assume the G7 has the same sensor. I haven't specifically tried the G7. But actually, there is a photo on my Twitter of a sunset of a boat kind of, on basically a boat sailing towards the sunset, and the sun is right above the boat. And it's top notch. And I use manual mode. So this is what I've always liked about the LG phones, ever since the G4, is that you put them in manual mode and magic happens. Like, right. So
and
nobody's going to do that, right?
Exactly.
I get it.
I'm going to go try that out now, and I'm going to see how that works actually today. But 9 times out of 10, that's never going to be a deciding factor.
It doesn't matter for people. Absolutely.
Exactly. Most people just want to open the camera and take a photo, and that's.
But it tells me that it's just a matter of tuning. Like, these sensors are good, and honestly, considering LG is using 1 micron pixel sensors on all their latest phones, the V30, V35, G7, it is incredible how good the low light performance is considering the pixel size. Right. And I think a lot of it has to do with the f/1.6 on the main camera. I mean, it's a fast lens.
In my very first line in that review, I say it comes very close to being a great phone, because I like everything else about it. I think Boombox is whatever. It's like a neat, gimmicky thing. Yeah. But I love the OLED brightness feature, and I think I love the AI key. I think definitely Google Assistant dedicated button is the way to go. It's just Like, everything about this phone is good. I think the design is a little bland, but whatever. It's not like a big deal for me.
I do like the width of the phone, as you said, and as I said, you know, like to me, I feel that they made a phone that, in terms of ergonomics, to hold in hand is phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it's comfortable to use. It's lightweight. Like I said earlier, it does feel a little cheap on that side because it's not as hefty as, say, U12 Plus, but, you know, I don't really mind it as much. I think I love how narrow it is. So there's a lot of things I like about it, but if you're charging $750 and then the camera quality at night when I go out to a restaurant is not going to be as what I can get on any other phone in this price bracket, I just can't recommend to someone. And also there's all the other things like software. It's fine, but there are some software quirks that I'm not huge fans of. It's not the worst UI skin out there.
It's not. It's like
okay.
It's like Samsung. I mean, Samsung's better in some ways because I think they've taken all the best stuff and kept it and thrown out the bad stuff, or at least you can turn off the bad stuff. But LG's still a little too customizey for me, if I had to pick. Yeah.
There's a little too much going on there,
but check the camera settings in manual. There is an option to turn on and off noise reduction in manual mode. Right. At least there was on the V30. I'm not sure about the G7, but on the V30, being able to play with these settings in manual, you can leave it in auto manual mode where it detects everything for itself. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to actually force anything and you don't have to use the manual controls, but it gives you more options to tweak things. That you should try it because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, and you'll be able to zoom in really nicely in low light as well and get some really good results. Which I've taken some photos of performances where I was in kind of the back row of a concert with the V30 at least, where I was like, I can't believe I just took this photo. You know, it's a zoomed photo and it's in low light and it came out really well, and I was like, how the hell did that happen? So I think there's a lot in there. And again, you know, that does not help people who just smash the camera. I mean, if you want good low light anyway, you're going to buy a P20 or the P20 Pro, because man, low light on the P20 Pro. I mean, as much as I love the Pixel 2, the P20 Pro low light, especially that night mode, is just insane.
Yeah, no, that night mode is always like sort of like a mind-blowing thing when I see it in action. It's like, that's just insane that it was all AIS, as they call it, basically.
Yeah, right? I know. So what are your thoughts on the OnePlus 6? I want to talk a little bit about that before we go into the news items.
I mean, again,
speaking of camera,
another win.
Where do you place the OnePlus 6? Because that's always been the thing about the OnePluses, right? The camera's always been on the weak side. I feel that they actually did it right this time. I mean, it's not like Pixel 2, Galaxy S9 quite yet, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely getting there, in my opinion, and very usable. Yeah,
no, I think the camera is perfectly fine because I tried to look at it as, you know, I'm paying extra money on phones like Pixel or Galaxy, and I'm getting a much better camera experience because it's more expensive. But I'm paying $530, and everything about this phone is just like right on the money. Camera, for me, in this price bracket, I am totally satisfied with it. I don't think it really is lacking in any particular thing. I just think maybe image quality isn't as good as, say, on other phones. But I think I haven't really had any major
Have you tried
problems.
low light? Because to me, I was blown away with low light. Like, I mean, not blown away compared to some of the best, but for OnePlus, I felt they did low light right finally. Like, and I think a lot of that has to be bringing OIS back, right? Because without optical stabilization, which they skipped for the last two phones, 5 and 5T, you're stuck. There's nothing you can do unless you're Huawei. But I feel like it's.
So you know what's funny? Actually,
work in low light.
We had a camera comparison go up about a week ago, or maybe less than that. It was comparing the OnePlus 6, 5T, 5, and 3T cameras.
Oh, interesting.
The 6 and the 3T were very similar, funny enough, and the 5 and the 5T were very similar, which makes sense hardware-wise, but 3T actually ended up winning more categories than either the 5 or the 5T did.
You know, at the time, I kept saying that the camera on the 3T was well sorted, and people were like, nah, it's a OnePlus, meh. And I'm like, no, guys, seriously, it's manageable. It's okay. Wasn't quite as good as the competition at the time, but I mean, it's received a lot of software updates too, and I haven't used it in 2 years, so I don't know. But I feel like the 6 is finally a phone from OnePlus where I don't feel like I'm losing out on anything. Which is wow, like really wow. Okay, I mean maybe waterproofing, but it's supposedly pretty water resistant according to teardowns.
The problem is that for me, every time I see another phone these days that is around the same price range as the OnePlus 6, I always just immediately, and it doesn't say have like a Snapdragon 845, or it doesn't have some of the design or features as like the OnePlus 6 does. I just can't. It's so hard for me to recommend anything else other than the OnePlus 6 in this price range because, at that price point, like, why would you spend all this money for this phone that is definitely going to be slower, doesn't look as good, it doesn't have as good of a camera, things like that. So the OnePlus 6 is easily a winner, not just among phones that are priced $500, but even, competing with higher end, it's able to match a lot of the flagships. Maybe again, not with the camera, but with everything else for sure, hands down.
Well, honestly, if you're looking at, say, a G7 versus a OnePlus 6, I mean,
get the OnePlus 6.
Get the one, yeah, right? I mean, unless you want the audio, that G6 still wins. Sorry, G7 still wins on the audio. If you were listening to music with headphones, it's still better. But
right.
that's a small reason, right? For $100 bucks, I mean, yeah.
Well, it'd be 100 and
more than 100, right? Because you have to, because there's only 4 gigs of RAM on the G7, right?
Exactly.
So you'd have,
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so you'd have to compare the 529 version with the $750 phone. That's $200 difference.
Exactly. So.
Yeah, there you have it. So, but I mean, in terms of design, I feel like OnePlus is really mature. They kind of combine some of the things I loved about the OnePlus 3 design, which really gave them a personality at the time, and some of the ergonomics and softness, which I felt in design-wise was a step back, but ergonomically was a step forward with the 5 series. And you got both of them kind of melded in the 6, and I feel that it feels really premium. It looks really premium. It finally seems to be able to compete with the big boys on design and materials, which, again, for at least $200 less, right?
Yep. No, I totally agree. It's just hard to not recommend that phone almost in every single way if you're someone that is budget conscious, I mean,
performance-wise has never been an issue with OnePlus, so you can win there, and you're going to get more RAM than everyone else for the price anyway. And battery life is pretty good. So, I don't know. I think we have a lot of good choices right now. This year, every year I say that. Oh, man, there's very little you can buy that's bad right now, but that's why we're having to be super nitpicky, like talking about the lack of hardware buttons on the U12 Plus, and talking about the low light performance of the G7 camera in full auto, and talking about the audio quality on the OnePlus 6 headphone jack, which, as I said, is fine, but
Exactly. Like a lot of these things that we nitpick are like fine for the average user, but there's a reason we nitpick, because that's how you really do distinguish what is truly better for your money. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to tell people, spend your money on this because of these X reasons.
Wow. Well, we have certainly covered the crap out of the U12 Plus and the a little bit more than I expect on the G7, which is frankly fantastic. And then the OnePlus 6, and we all agree that they are decent phones with their strengths and weaknesses. And that brings us to the news, I think. There's a bunch of stuff I want to just run by you quickly. Let's start with something that you were directly involved with. That's going to confuse everybody because we just talked about the G7. It's the V35 ThinQ from LG, which is essentially a V30 physically with the guts of a G7. Wouldn't I say that correct?
Yes and no, because I feel like it's better to just say...
What are the differences?
So it's exactly the same as the V30. It has a Snapdragon 845.
So it's a better chip.
If anything, it's actually better to say it's exactly the same as the V30S ThinQ, if you remember that phone that came out at MWC.
But that only had an 835.
It does change the 845, but that one had 6 gigs of RAM, and this one has 16 gigs of RAM. The V30 had 4 gigs of RAM. And the only other thing that's different is it has the AI cam and the ThinQ stuff, but also exact same camera as the G7, But the camera is just about the only thing it shares with the G7. It doesn't have the boombox feature. It doesn't have that super LCD thing. So it's just the
I heard it's a different OLED screen than the V30. Is that right?
They haven't really given me a lot of details because the person I was talking to, I don't think was fully knowledgeable about all that.
Did you get this
details.
from AT&T or LG, by the way?
I got it from LG, but I think it was a PR agency that LG was working for, so no actual,
right.
Access to engineers from LG. But I don't think I've seen any of the problems I thought people had with the original V30 display. To be honest, I don't think I had as many issues with the V30 display that other people had.
Neither did I, to be frank.
Yeah, so I think the screen... So for the V35, I am baffled that they're releasing it, mostly because I have no idea why it's $900.
Holy crap!
Yeah, it's $900 in Project Fi. It is $900 on AT&T, which are the only two places that you can get it. It just doesn't make any sense because the V30 came out at $800, but you would think that, say, if the V40 came out later this year, it's not going to start at $900, right? Why would it? Because it really is just adding those bumped up processor and specs, no new features that we haven't seen before. That's
insane. Why would you buy that when you can buy a G7 for $750? Well, not from AT&T, I guess, but whatever. Buy the unlocked version. Wait, is there an unlocked version of the G7 in the US?
There isn't actually. Well, so they haven't announced an unlocked for either V35 or G7. So far, G7 you can buy on Sprint, T-Mobile at Verizon. V35 you can buy on AT&T and Project Fi. I'm not sure if there's going to be an unlocked one.
Screw it. I would import it at this point. Whatever.
But it just doesn't there's no reason, again, going back to it's the camera that is going to be the biggest downfall of this in this price bracket, in that just import a P20 Pro at that point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to spend that kind of money, that's ridiculous. $900 anyway. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but it's nice to hear your take. I know I will post the link to your story. You did a hands-on, so you guys can find out more information there. I just want to go through some of these items because some of them are interesting. Let's talk about the Xiaomi Mi 8, which basically looks like a complete iPhone 10 ripoff. I know we say that often, but I think in this case, in typical Xiaomi fashion, wow, talk about a ripoff.
I mean, I'm not surprised. I feel like Xiaomi has often done something like that. I mean, yeah, they've had their own designs and things that stand out, but I'm honestly, especially after going through MWC and seeing all these iPhone lookalikes, it just doesn't surprise me too much anymore. Yeah, it looks like an iPhone and they're just not ashamed of it.
I know, but I mean, they do this. I mean, Xiaomi does this often, as I said. It's just... This is so blatant to me. It's like, wow. I mean, they didn't even try, it seems. But what's interesting, and this is why I want to talk about this, really. There's only one reason. I don't really care about the phone that much. It's what I expect from Xiaomi. Lots of features, good price, copycat design. But it's the 3D face scan feature. Basically, this seems to be potentially the first Android phone in the world that actually does proper face identification or face biometrics for unlocking. So it'll be interesting to see. Of course, there is probably going to be a version of this phone, probably in India, that has Google Play services. It'll be really interesting to see if it supports Google Pay with Face ID, kind of like the iPhone supports, and Apple Pay with Face ID, right?
Yeah, so that was what I was going to ask, because really it doesn't matter if this is good for security, because doesn't it require quite a level of integration with Google to have sort of a system-wide support for Face ID being used?
If it appears as a fingerprint reader, basically, but instead it's if it's a hardware base, right? Right.
Okay, gotcha.
So it registers itself the same way.
If it can do that, then that would be the great, first, because it's kind of crazy that we still haven't, at least even from Samsung, been able to
Actually, I thought it'd be Huawei first, to be honest with you. They'd been talking about doing face unlock for a while now. They'd shown at CES, if you were at the Honor press conference, they showed something on the screen briefly that looked like a sensor that's basically like a Kinect in the front of a phone. And then they never mentioned anything about it ever again.
Yeah, I mean, it's still always just sort of embarrassing whenever you hear, oh, we have face unlock, and then they say right next line, they're like, but it's meant for, ease of use or convenience as opposed to security. It's just kind of sad that Apple has beaten everyone to the punch in a drastic way about just having that extra level of biometric security that Face ID does provide. And I mean, obviously we sort of knew eventually it would come to make its way to Android. I'm a little surprised it has taken a few more months than I thought it would. I thought we'd see a few phones, at least at MWC, that would have something a little better than what we've seen so far. But I'll have to test out the Mi8 and see how that works.
Yeah, I think the first phone that'll really do it right might be the Pixel 3, to be honest.
If they have the notch with the Pixel 2 XL, I do hope that they do place an emphasis on not just throwing in a front-facing camera and an earpiece in there, but also making that front-facing camera, because they're also doing this clear push for AR-Core, and people love Snapchat filters. I think if they can do some kind of better integration with AR-Core and the front-facing camera, that might be definitely
that's
useful.
Going to be a requirement for sure.
Yeah.
So Qualcomm launched a Snapdragon processor, the XR1, that's dedicated to AR and VR. Thoughts?
If I recall, the Mirage Solo was using the Snapdragon 835, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, always I feel like there's not a lot of information from that XR1 story that...
True. It's more like, this is what we're doing. And I'm like, duh, of course you're going to make a custom chip.
The only thing I'm afraid of is, like, I just hope they don't abandon it like they sort of did with the Wear 2100
the Wear
chip.
ones, yeah.
Which finally they're now making another chip for later this year. But, it always makes sense to have a custom chip for custom applications rather than just reusing something that was, say, meant for a phone, for example. So,
the next thing we know, if they go at this rate, they've done one for wearables. They've done one, of course, they've done the ones for the phones, and they have all kinds of tiers. They've got now one for AR and VR. I wouldn't be surprised if they make one for PCs at some point. Because
I believe
why
that
not?
Was actually, there was news this morning. I think it was the Snapdragon 850 is going to be meant for laptops and tablets, mostly I think low power laptops, but it was going to be for laptops and tablets. So I think they're definitely doing that.
Is that real or is that a rumor?
No, I don't remember. I do remember seeing something about it. I didn't read much into it to see if it was rumor or official news, but I do remember last year when they had that big press junket going to Hawaii.
I was there,
I'm pretty sure they had a lot of... No, I wasn't there.
Oh, you didn't go? I thought you were there.
No, they said that someone else. But they had rumblings of using the 845 for Chromebooks or some other type of laptop devices, I think. So,
well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's going to have to happen. So maybe that's what it is. But we'll see. I mean, Computex is coming up, right? Hey! Wouldn't that be the best place to make an announcement?
Yep.
Anyway, so that's cool. There's really nothing to talk about here other than there's a chip, but there's no devices. Let's find out what happens. Kudos to Qualcomm. They know how to run their business. I mean, it's all about chips. Let's make more chips. Woohoo!
Yep.
You love how I simplified that to death. Okay. Essential is up for sale, and they won't be making another phone. That's a bit old because it dropped right at the end of when I recorded my last podcast. But what is your take on that?
So I don't know, because so when I reached out, they gave me the same response that Andy Rubin tweeted out. Basically, like, they're going to continue. They do some evaluate the products they're working on, and they do still plan on doing mobile
the PR answer,
and home products. So sure. I think the rumor was that they definitely did cancel the Essential Phone 2. Who knows? Maybe. I'm a little disappointed if that's the case, because I would have liked for them to capture the $500 market and create some competition between the OnePlus 6.
Yeah.
But because honestly, if what it sounds like they're working on building their smart home product, I don't really think that's going to be a good idea for them. I don't know if anyone's going to care. I feel like even
they might have a trick up their sleeve that nobody else has. Who knows? I mean, that's the thing.
Exactly.
I believe there's potential for great innovation from Andy and his team. I just feel like I'm bummed as a phone person because I like the Essential with all of its flaws. I like the Essential. I thought it was cool, and I wanted to see a second gen that fixed some of these things and improved and refined and learned and blah blah blah. And I feel the same way as you. I think it's a bummer.
But, the whole home thing, it's such a, like, it's not a crowded market, but at the same time, it's a crowded
market.
Well, it's a crowded market in that, in terms of smart home products and assistants you talk to, there really are only three major ones, right? And even then, Siri isn't as isn't as popular as, say, Google Assistant or Alexa, obviously, but I don't exactly know the angle they were taking with it, so I can't really talk about it, but it sounds like something that just seems way too difficult for them to suddenly enter the market with. Essential home is what they're going to call it, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just seems like something that's maybe too much of a risk, especially considering their flagship product now is not really going to have a follow-up. So, just for the average public, I think they're not even a brand that's in their mind. People don't really know who Andrew Rubin is in terms of, again, mainstream audience. So I don't know. There's just a lot that is very on the fence about what they're doing if it's not a phone. I feel like having at least a phone presence would help their other businesses, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, they're not going to come out with the home product rumored until 2019, so it might just be a while until we hear from them next.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it's wait and see and bummer. Basically, is my take. Wait and see, comma, bummer. Period. That's my headline. Speaking of phones, it's all we are talking about today, really, which is great. I want to talk about some cheap phones. Well, cheaper-ish. It looks like Alcatel is beating ZTE to the Android Go release. As you know, Alcatel One X was officially made official, launching whenever next week. And it is a very cheap phone, $100, Android Go phone. And ZTE had announced an Android Go phone, but as you know, ZTE is kind of dead in the water right now. So it's funny that I think Alcatel won this one in the sense of they're going to be first out with an Android Go phone in the US. Of course, there's also Nokia, but we're not going to see that one probably. If we do, it's not going to be right away.
Hang on, actually, I'm pretty sure the Tempo Go became available about a month ago.
Yeah, but it's never available. If you look, it was.
It's out of stock,
came out.
It says,
It was supposed to be available, but it's been permanently out of stock.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. Like I officially for sure ZTE.
Yeah, I guess it is going to be the.
But
Alcatel
in terms
Go,
of buying an Android Go phone, Alcatel wins.
Yep.
Yes. So I'm going to get one and I'll let you know what I think. I'm looking forward to this one. Speaking of, I did receive an Alcatel 3V review unit, which I sadly won't have time to play with until after Computex at this point. But it is in my bag of tricks and I'll play with it and let you know what I think. I did an unboxing. Check out my video. Not bad for $150. Did you have one?
We just posted a review of it like a week ago, I think.
Okay. Well, I'll link to it. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet. Because, that way you'll get the lowdown from Julian and his team and you'll get the unboxing from me. Woohoo. And speaking of cheaper-ish, steepish phone, the Nokia is released or announced specs and release dates for the three phones, the 2 and the 3 and the 5, which are the 2018 edition of these phones, which is 2.1, 3.1, 5.1. As you know, there's a 6.1. But strangely, there's a 7 Plus, not a 7.1. But the 6 and the 7 were done at MWC, so these are kind of new. And we probably won't see them in the US, which is a real bummer. Only the 2.1 has a Qualcomm chipset, and it's really low end.
That one's Android Go, yep.
Is it Android Go, the 2.1?
Yeah, the 2.1 is Android Go.
I thought it was. Wasn't there a Nokia 1? That's on Android Go, or was that no?
The Nokia one is also Android Go, but that was the first one they announced at MWC, and the 2.1 is going to be the next Android Go.
And then there's a 3.1 and 5.1. The 3.1 is interesting because it's a small phone, like physically.
Yeah, I mean,
and I
they're
like
all
small
generally
phones.
interesting. Yeah.
Of course they are. And you know what? I did when the PR folks, I had the briefing for this under embargo, and I told them, folks, this is all nice, but you got to send me the phones, right? Like,
Yeah, I know.
you're European PR and you have your US PR people, but they have not sent me anything. And the only thing I've managed to get so far is a 3310 or whatever, the retro phone from last year.
Right.
And that's all I've gotten. And that was after begging a lot.
So we have the benefit of having a guy in the UK, so he's been reviewing a lot of their stuff. But we in the US were finally able to get the Nokia 6.1.
I know. But see, for me, even that, they didn't offer me a review in it. It's like I'm like, come on, guys. I used to cover extensively Nokia in the mid 2000s when I started blogging. Why do you send me the stuff from time to time? Do I have to dig and beg? I've got too many phones already. Jesus.
So just to clarify on the US availability, the 5.1 is not coming, but the 2.1 is actually coming in the US in September, $120. I don't know about the 3.1
so
yet.
Maybe there's going to be some choices. Maybe ZTE will be back in business by then, and we'll be. That's what the rumors are.
See.
All right, so we've covered almost everything. There's one more thing I want to kind of mention really quickly. This show wouldn't be complete with weird fringe products from time to time. And I get stuff sent all the time that's kind of crazy. And I don't necessarily do videos of everything that I get because I don't have time. But sometimes I get something that kind of makes me scratch my head. And it's kind of good but bad. So I had to kind of mention it. This company called Norshire, Norshire, sent me this thing, which is a car washer jump starter battery pack thing. And I tried it out because, why not? I got to wash my car sometime. And the verdict is that I don't think it's going to replace your pressure washer near your house that you can pay and put coins in or, takes credit cards, which I think is definitely the best way to pressure wash and clean your car thoroughly if you DIY it. It's also not going to replace your hose in your driveway if you have a strong enough water pressure and a proper adapter for getting some more pressure out of your hose. But if you are, say, mountain biking and you want to put the mountain bikes on the rack in the back of the car, or put if you have your dirt bike and you want to put the motorcycles in the bed of your pickup and they're really filthy, like dripping muddy filthy, this thing is battery powered, only requires basically a bucket of water or like a 5-gallon water container, and can pressure wash multiple times, multiple buckets worth on its battery power. And it's not high pressure, so it's basically more a rinse down. But I thought that was kind of cool because, I'm a car person. And more importantly, it does jump starting too, like a lot of these, because it's got a big lithium-ion battery in there. So it can jump start your car a few times. It has 2 USB ports, so you can charge, probably 100 times your phone, because I think the battery is something like 15,000 milliamp hour or some huge amount. Probably even bigger than that. But anyway, I'll link to the Indiegogo campaign in my show notes, because if you're a car person who wants some kind of wonky accessory that is mobile related because you can charge your phones on it, check it out. It's a little cheaply made. It's kind of, very, very Chinese Shenzhen special, but it does a job. And I don't think it's going to replace you washing your car yourself with the proper equipment. But for rinsing stuff down in a place where you don't have access to power and you just have water, like a creek or something, this is awesome. So that's kind of why I'm mention it. Are you a car person? You're a New Yorker, so it's tough to be a car person in New York, but
Yeah, not so much. I mean, I had a car back when I was in Jersey and did drive to my old job, but haven't really driven in 2 to 3 years now. So
this wouldn't matter too much to you.
No.
Well, have you? I don't know if you clicked on the link at all. I
did.
Busy. What did you think? Does it look as janky as I described it?
Yep, it looks like a completely bizarre product and something you not unsurprising to see on Indiegogo, to be honest.
Totally, it's a totally Indiegogo thing. It does. One of the things I thought was cool was it's the right shape to fit inside your spare wheel donut. If you have one of those spare wheels, I think it will fit inside the hub. Probably in most cars. Again, most cars probably don't even have a spare anymore. Well, anyway, that was a good show. Do you want to tell people where they can find you, Julian, on the internets?
Sure. You can always check out digitaltrends.com, but of course you can check out my silly tweets at Julian Chokkattu on Twitter. That's where I'm probably the most active, and yeah.
Any Instagrams or Facebooks or anything that people should follow you on?
If you see, I have the blessing of having a very unique last name. So if you just search for my last name and my first name, you're guaranteed to find all of my things. So
Awesome.
Might not be a good thing, but
well, whatever. I mean, look, Digital Trends has some really good coverage on phones. If it's not the first name that comes to mind when you think of phones, but I encourage you to check it out. I like to read Julian's stories; they're great. And most recently, U12 Plus hands-on. So I'll have all that linked in the notes. And I want to thank quickly our podcast sponsor, that's audible.com. If you love audiobooks and maybe you commute or fly or whatever, and you have an opportunity to listen to books, but you might not be able to read them, this is a great way to get your bookworm on. So go check out Audible. And if you do click on the link that will be in the show notes, you'll support the podcast. You won't get a special discount, but you'll be able to join Audible while supporting the podcast. And so the link is audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. You guys know where to find me. I'm at ThankGirl on Twitter. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character without the vowels. That's also my Instagram. And you can find my YouTube videos on youtube.com/MiriamJoire. That's my full name spelt out with a Y, Miriam. And you'll find videos that complement this podcast. Subscribe to the channel, like the videos, help me out. This is just more like reference material for this podcast. mobiletechpodcast.com is where you'll find the show. We're on Overcast, we're on iTunes, we're on Pocket Casts. Search for Mobile Tech Podcast or ThankGirl, TNKGRL, or both, and you'll find me that way. And subscribe. Please tell your friends. Julian, great to have you on. Thanks so much for being on the show. It was great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll have you back sometime soon. And in the meantime, stay tuned for another show next week. Bye, everyone.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with ThankGirl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.